If you really want to grow your business, understand everything that we can, folks, about the metrics and numbers in the business. Because what ends up happening to most business owners, and private equity companies love this, is they haven't been running the business by the numbers, putting systems and processes into the business. So you end up leaving, if you can sell your company, and majority of companies don't sell, you end up leaving millions, tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars out of your bank account. And the more that you're financially aware of the rules, the better you will fare.
Welcome to the Profit Answer Man podcast. We believe the purpose of business is to make lots of money. We'll show you how to scale and grow your profit and cash flow, all while working less. We're a big fan of the ELF model: easy, lucrative, and fun. If you're the backbone of America, you deserve to be well rewarded for that. Listen in to see how other business owners are doing it and how to maximize your profit and cash flow. Welcome back to the Profit Answer Man, Doug Brown. It's great to have you back again.
Rocky, thanks for having me and trusting me with another episode. I appreciate you doing so. Very grateful.
I very much enjoyed our last episode, and we talked about why businesses fail. And a lot of it has to do, the owner is too busy solving the symptom and not fixing the root causes.
Yes.
You and I both know, nobody likes math, so they ignore the math.
Yes.
They all love what they do, but I don't know if you are. I'm a systems guy, and so everything to me is a system. If you don't have a system, you're the bottleneck. We always talk about raising prices, and then, hey, as a business owner, let's face it, there is fear, and there's always worry, and those were a lot of the issues that we talked about last time. But we're going to go deeper, because you've owned or been involved with 37 different companies. And so you've seen patterns and issues. And I'd love to kind of dig into that. What are the common issues that are out there? And where do these business owners get stuck? Where'd you get stuck during that whole process?
Okay, so we have a long list.
We do. We'll get to what we get to.
So I think I'd like to start by, most people when they get into business, Rocky, they're doing it for usually three reasons. One, they want to make more money, they want to have more time, they want to have more freedom of some sort.
We call that ELF.
ELF?
Easy, lucrative, and fun.
Well, I'm going to borrow ELF going forward if you're okay with that. Easy, lucrative, and fun. Yeah, I mean, the thing is for most people when they get into business, on that easy, lucrative, and fun, they sometimes get one out of the three, but most of the time they don't get any out of the three. So, usually the one they get more so is the lucrative, the money. They start seeing a little bit more money or a lot more money, but then they build a business that is key man dependent, meaning they build it on their back. They don't have systems, processes, and things in place, and they end up making less money, having less time, and certainly less freedom. And so, you asked me what the common issues are. That's the number one thing that I've done in my life or witnessed other people doing, and then figured out how to not do that. So to me, that's where the common issues are, and they all kind of spawn out from that. And why they happen that way is most of us who get into business. Go ahead, sir.
No, I was going to say, I think what I have found is business owners are really good at what they do. So if you're a plumber, they're great at plumbing, or if they're run a restaurant, they're great at being the chef or serving their clients. But there's the other half of it, right? Running the business.
Yeah.
And that's the part none of them like. And I don't blame them.
Well, they were never taught either, E-Myth, the Molly, the muffin baker story. Those of you who don't know, it's a book and a methodology. That technician, you're really good at something. And then you get into business. And my dad was this way. My dad was a brilliant brilliant technician in the electrical world. Used to get calls from all over the world to come solve problems. 19 years later of being in business, he walked in, put the key in the door one day and just locked it and walked away. And I went to him and I said, Dad, why don't we sell this? I was 19 years old. He said, I just don't have it in me anymore. I don't even have the ability to want to be here anymore. So they sold the building and they lost millions and millions and millions of dollars not selling it the right way, but he bought a boat and went fishing. And, he was happy for about 5 years doing that after he, detoxed through. So he ended up coming back into the business and I actually helped him build it the right way. And he ended up doing quite well. But at that point, I was in my mid-20s and I had learned some things. So, if we are the technician, but we've never been taught business or how to run a business, that's where we run into challenges. And quite frankly, we're not taught it in grade school or high school or, even university.
I have an MBA. They didn't teach it to me. Right. And that's the key to this whole thing is you have to figure out how to run the business. And unfortunately, this is the other thing that I run into. There's two kinds. There's two different separate types of business owners. And the first one is the business owners want to learn from their own mistakes. And I don't understand that one. I like to learn from other people's mistakes, right? So I want to learn from what somebody else is teaching me. And then there's the second type of issue, which is a lot of business owners think if I just have more money, everything will work out. And so they chase revenue.
Yeah.
And they keep getting more and more revenue, and the problems get bigger and bigger and more complex, and they buckle under it. And the two are probably, related, but those are the two biggest things that I see.
Yeah, so there was a study I just read recently that said most CEOs, it was in the 60%, high 60s. Most CEOs are sales and marketing focused. And then there's the next category, which is the numbers focused. And then the next category, which was a very tiny percentage, was process focused.
So, you know who Gino Wickman, he wrote Traction. Yeah. He wrote all of that. Gino talks about the visionary and the integrator. And so the visionary is the person with all the great ideas. The integrator is the person who takes your great ideas and turns them into reality. And I was really shocked. He goes, for every 4 visionaries, there's 1 integrator, meaning it's really hard to find that person who can take your wild and crazy ideas and actually make them come to life.
Yeah, I think Gino's 4-to-1 ratio is off.
Okay.
I think it's more like 100-to-1. So, and I'll tell you why I say this. And the reason I say this is I was at an M&A, a partners type conference, and there were literally 800 people in this conference. And the founder of the company got up and spoke and he said, I'd like to know how many of you are creatives and visionaries. You see an idea, you know how to capitalize on it, so to speak. You go for it. And the majority of the hands went up. Like it almost looked like no one was left in the audience, but these creatives. And then he said, okay, now I want you to raise your hand if you're an integrator, if you put these pieces together, if you put process around it, if you're the Six Sigma black belt type people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And 6 people raised their hand in the audience. And then he said, could you all stand up, please? And they stood up and he said, all you creatives, I want you to get with these 6 people because your business is not going where you want it to unless you have one of these. And I thought the point was really well, he presented the point really well. And there are way more creatives than there are integrators in the world, or all the integrators are hiding somewhere in a community that no one knows exists.
Partially they're hiding. Partially, I know for me, because I fall into that category.
Yeah.
For a long part of my life, I just didn't realize how different I was. and I didn't realize that this was a gift and that it was a rare gift. I'm like, if you want to do something, you just do it. Here's the order you do it in, and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it was so natural to the way I did things that I didn't know that I should be better utilizing that skill, because a lot of people don't understand it or don't value it. Because if you're trying to fix systems, if I go into whoever at the next office, let me help you fix that system so you can get your work done in 10% of the time, they get mad at me.
Well, because the majority of people see revenue, they're always talking about revenue, right? It's like revenue's king, queen. And the reality is, well, I'll illustrate it this way. I was talking to a company that were doing over $1 billion. And I said to them, I said, what's your operating profit? And they said, we're doing over $1 billion. And I said, no, I get that. That's revenue. What's your EBITDA or your operating, like, and they said, we're well over $1 billion. And I said, wait a minute, guys, gals, let's just get EBIT. Let's just take what your revenue is, subtract your cost of goods. What's that number? And they said, we're over. And I just put my hand up and I said, guys, how much money are you losing? And it was a pause in the room. And then they said these words, Rocky, 72 million a year. So go back to your point of, some want to learn by the mistakes, right? And I always believe it's better, much better to watch a boxer and realize when the punch is coming and let the boxer take the punch in the face and then learn, oh, every time that person's punching this guy in the face, he's biting his lip on the left-hand side. And if the guy just moved, he wouldn't get hit. To me, I'd rather learn that way than to get punched in the face. I'd also rather learn financially not to watch my bank account, which I have had happen in my days, go from high seven figures to zero, So I think the biggest mistake that people make, Rocky, is they don't live by the formula, which is money in plus money out equals a result.
So this is, and I'm working on this, right? Because everyone knows money in and technically they know money out. I'm like, business is really simple. The gap between those two is what we want to focus on increasing. The bigger the gap, the happier we all are.
Yeah.
That gap is profit. And yet, like, that simple concept doesn't seem to get through. I don't know why.
Oh, I know. I promise you this is correct. You don't do 37 companies and not learn a few things. You know what I mean? Like, you and I have worked with literally thousands of other companies over the years, right? So you learn a few things. Here's the thing. Business is so easy until we add people.
That's my saying. My spreadsheets behave. The people don't.
That's the thing. Like, when we add people, like, I'll give you a simple example, and all of you who own companies probably can relate to something like this. I have a client that I'm working with right now. We built a sales team for them. We're doing really great. Right out of the gate, things are moving really ahead nicely. And we have one sales individual at this point who is now, instead of following the compliance documents, this company's in a industry that compliance is there. He's now going to AI and making up his own emails and making up his own correspondence back and forth and his own voicemails and his own this and his own that. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I just thought this was better than what we had. And so I'm like, do you realize you could cost the company $100 million in compliance errors and what you're trying to do, right? That type of thing. And so this gentleman, 2 conversations on that subject matter, had this need to be creative. And so we had to release him, because if we don't release him, the money out's going to go out a lot faster when maybe FTC or some governing board comes in there and starts to wrap up the company, right? So how do you handle those issues? We must have planning, procedures, processes, systems, accountability, and implementation to all that wrapped into everything that we do.
You missed one word: courage.
Oh,
The courage to do what you did, which is go, we got to get this guy out of here.
Yeah. Well, that goes down to, having the discipline to run the company by the money in plus money out equals formula, right? Because there's only three things that come out of that formula. There's profit, break even, or loss. At the end of a time duration, those are the three things that work out. But if we also put another equal sign to whatever that result is, equals, and draw a stick figure, if you will, and then write the owner's name or write anybody's name that is, part of that company, and then write quality of life next to it, that result equals the quality of life of those people and their families and everything that's going on. So if we don't have the courage to do what you just said, Rocky, it throws the formula off, and we've got to have that discipline around that. And I find that's where a lot of people, because they're people, they grew up a certain way, they have certain beliefs and values and things like that. It clouds the operational, what's the word I'm looking? It clouds how business runs regardless of whether the human being likes it or not. And that's where I think people get into trouble, because they don't run it through that lens. Is this actually helping us get to where we want to be on the equal sign, or is this possibly helping us, or is this going to hurt us?
And so that's a big part of what I like to do. And my clients know it's basically, does this math out? And we look at it, and we take the potential sales and what it takes to get those potential sales and the cost to get those potential sales, meaning the marketing and the sales.
Mhm.
And then we look what it costs to deliver that sale. And then we look at what it costs for the overhead for doing that. And then we say, well, what was the outcome? If we follow this idea, and this is what it takes to drive sales, and this was what it cost to deliver, and this is what it would cost to run that part of the company, did we make money, and how much? And when they do that, and they're like, okay, in order to do this, I have to invest 400,000 to make that happen, and I'm going to make 30 grand a year. And they're usually like, well, that's not a good return.
Right.
I'm not going to do that. They might look at it and they go, okay, I'm going to invest 400 grand and I'm going to make 4 million in 2 years. And even if we do half of that, worst case scenario, I'm still making 2 million in 2 years. It's 400 in. I think that's a pretty good opportunity. I think we should go for that. And so that to me is what I call a business model. Does the business model math? Does the assumptions you're making actually get you the results? And I've sat down, like I had one client who wanted to hit a certain revenue number. And I said, okay, let's work backwards. In order to hit that revenue number, you need how many sales? Because what's your average sale? And they told me the number. And I go, okay, so you need, I forget, 50 sales. In order to get 50 sales, how many leads do you need? Well, we'd need 400 leads. I go, okay, you need 400 leads. It's a high price sale. I'm like, what are the chances of us getting 400 leads? And they're like, I think we need to talk about something else. Because they realized that was going to be super difficult, like that it was an unrealistic goal until they built a better lead management system for their company or a better way of doing it. But when you look at it that way, which is what you help clients do too, I think it makes decisions easier. It's no longer my gut, it's the outcome says this is probably where we're going to be.
Yeah. And you hit the key word, outcome. So a lot of times people aren't really clear on the outcome that they're looking for. So they're kind of floating on that. And there's nothing wrong with being creative and subjective. I mean, I'm as creative as the next person. I've just learned to be an integrator on many fronts, but my dominant's still creative. And, and so I surround myself with integrators. So it's, but the thing is like the math doesn't, somebody once said this to me, Rocky, which is men lie, women lie, math doesn't lie. And I said, in its purest context, that's true. However, usually men or women are doing the math. So,
well, that goes back to my calculation. I said you need 400 leads.
right.
Can you do that? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, then the math isn't going to work. And you know that. Now you can fudge it. Most business owners might go, I can get 1,000 leads. I'm like, that's great. How many did you get last year? 50. How are you going to go from 50 to 1,000?
Well, I think that and are these 1,000 qualified sales ready leads, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because most people don't think like, they think lead volume is also, it's like revenue. We generate 30,000 leads a month. Great. How many sales? What is the end point? Right? Because if you have 1,000 leads that are not qualified, you're just creating more activity and you're losing money, not just on the lead cost, folks. The time in, the lost cause of what you could be doing with that time, like all, maybe people are quitting. There's all kinds of factors. So when you look at the whole customer journey across the board, and you break that down into segments, and then you look at each segment and measure those segments and get the math and the ratios, now that starts to tell you a story. And all you creatives out there are probably going, I'd rather die than do this.
Hire one of us.
Get someone in there, right? It's like, because if you don't, here's what ends up happening. And I've done this. Believe me, I've done this. I'm not saying anything on this call that I haven't done personally and experienced the pain out of. I know it's going to work. It's going to work. It's just got to work. There's a need in the market. I can see the need. I subjectively know everything. Let's dump a bunch of money, energy, and time into this thing and then find out, oh, great, it worked. Or in probably half the cases I've done that, it didn't. And, so I have to give Russ Whitney actually told me this one day. Those of you who don't know Russ, he large company, billion-dollar company, owned brands like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and things like that. So he said to me, he said, Doug, what we do, we take a budget, we stick it there, and then we build something for 12 weeks. We get together, we have a meeting, and we say, do we continue or do we stop? And I said, well, Russ, sometimes we built things up into $1 million at that period of time that we've set there. You're telling me we get to $1 million and you want to have a meeting like that to determine whether we pull the plug? He goes, yeah, if our goal is to get it to 10 million or 20 million. And I believe that is super sage advice for people. Set a budget, figure it out, give it time, then have a meeting and pull the plug if it's not going to work. Because most people go, oh, I'll just try this. Oh, I'll just try that. And they keep going on and on and on and on and on. And the opportunity cost alone, Rocky, is killing them, and eventually they run out of money.
And so those are the hard conversations I have with my clients of when are we going to do something different? When are we going to change? I've seen it in a variety of different ways. I think the biggest one that I see it occurring with is they watch that baseball movie, Build It and They Will Come, right? And so they build the business for what they expect in revenue, and the revenue doesn't come.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to unbuild the business because you've got to let people go. You've got to cut your costs and do things like that. And that's difficult. And so that's probably the biggest where I see what you're talking about. The other is it's like all of a sudden, and this happens more than I can imagine. And honestly, I'd like to hear if it's happened to you. Business is just humming along just perfectly fine. And out of left field, you get punched in the face, and you don't even know you got punched in the face, but revenue just dropped by 50% this month. And we're like, was that a fluke? Did something change? And the next month, maybe it was at 55 or 60. And it's like, we got 2 bad months in a row. If you have that much of a drop and you talk about a 10 or 15% margin, you just lost a crap ton of money. You just burned through whatever shortfall you might have had. Maybe you're not paying vendors. It becomes a very difficult thing to go, something's broken and I got to really change, and knowing that that happened. And it happens for a variety of different reasons. Have you ever experienced something like that?
Every day of my life. so, so I'm actually talking with a company right now. I can't give exact numbers, but let's say the bank account was a healthy 7-figure bank account and it dropped to a low 6-figure bank account quickly. And I have that conversation many, many times. Here's why I think it happens. Most people know or see something coming, but they're in denial. So I was just we drove from Michigan and we were driving down to Chicago, and I'm looking at the skies and I'm going, those clouds don't look happy at all. The sky's starting to get a little more orangey. And I'm like, wait a minute. I said to my wife, I said, hon, look at those clouds. And if they start turning or they start trying to like get closer to the ground or whatever, you let me know, because we're not going that direction. We're going this direction. So then it got a little bit better. And then the clouds looked kind of angry again. And we had an agenda to get another 35 minutes toward Chicago before we were going to start for that night. And I said to her, I said, what do you think? She goes, well, I really don't know, because she didn't grow up in an area around tornadoes. I've experienced a few in my life. And I said, you know what? I think we probably should stop here. And she said, all right, whatever. We'll find a hotel. And we did. The moment we drove into the parking lot, my phone rings and it's a friend from Chicago. And he's like, don't come to Chicago tonight. Tornadoes are touching down everywhere. We get into the parking lot, we park the car, and all of a sudden, Rocky, wind starts blowing everywhere. And I'm like, grab your bags, we're going inside. And so here's what happened. Tornadoes started touching down. There were 3 of them that I know of that started touching down about 30 minutes right where we were going to be. I called the hotel where we had already booked and I said, look, we can't get there. Here's what they said to me. Get off the phone right now. We've got to get to the basement. Now, if I had stayed in denial all the way down to where our hotel was going to be, I probably would have experienced the Wizard of Oz scene where Dorothy was flying around in that, right? Because if I stayed in denial, no, I can do it. My ego, I'm a man here. I can get this thing. I can bring it forth. I can do that. That's where I see people get into trouble. They see the signs. They know there's warning signs, and they have blind faith that this is going to work out. And I will tell most people, it doesn't most of the time. It works out, but not as you expect it to.
There's that. And I agree with you. I think the second part of it is, can they survive long enough to work it out? And what I mean by that is, let's go back to that same thing. Let's say you're doing $1 million a month. You got a 15% profit margin. So you're making 150 a month. Okay.
Right.
You have a 30% decline in revenue. All right. So now you're down 300. Your 150's gone. You're negative. Just for simple math, you're negative 150 each month. The end of 3 months, you're minus 450 grand.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what kind of reserves did you have? What kind of things do you have to get you through? Because even if tomorrow you made 150 and everything worked on the 4th month, you still have to recoup 3 months, which means it's going to take you at least 3 or 4 months just to get back to even. And that's a great case scenario. I think what a lot of business owners do at that point is, I've seen them take out some of these loans that are predatory. And so they borrow the money to get through 4, 5, and 6. And now, not only are they negative, they burn through all their cash. Now they've got massive debt. They don't realize it's going to take them 2 years to dig out of that hole. You've got to act quickly when these things happen, and you've got to make fast decisions.
Well, here's the thing. Money in, money out equals. Let's talk about we're losing 30%. Just what you were just saying, right? Whatever numbers people are doing in their head, right? If we're down 50,000 a month, let's say, you still have the overhead on the company the same.
Correct.
So your money out is going out a lot faster than we think we are. So let's just take something like pure savings. And I just did these numbers for a company so I can tell you they're accurate. So if someone is 13% EBITDA on their company, for those of you who are like, what's EBITDA? Let's just call it operating profit. Okay. Well, I didn't know what EBITDA was when I first started looking at it. I had to learn it, right? So for every $1,000 that you discount or every $1,000 you lose, you've got to sell $7,600 to make up for that loss.
That's a lot.
So if you sell $10,000, that's $76,000. If you lose $100,000, that's $760,000. Now, if you're losing that 3 months in a row, you're now talking $2.5 million essentially that you've got to, the numbers aren't that high, but $2.25 million. And so you're right. It might take 2 years or longer, Rocky, but what they don't figure out is even when you lose that money statically, when inflation kicks in, as it has been, all the things that are happening, that number gets inflated. And so when you're losing money, it takes you a lot longer. I would say in general, almost everything in business takes you a lot longer than you figure, 2 to 3 times longer, and it costs you 2 to 3 times more than you figure. But but when you're losing money and you're in denial on it, now you're going to take that bank loan. May not be the worst thing to do because you got to bail yourself out of it. But now you have interest on top of what you might have not had to take the bank loan over if you reacted quicker.
And I think that's the key. You have to make decisions quickly. And sometimes you got to rip the Band-Aid off and do that. What I try to tell my clients is if we have time, meaning we've worked out some problems and things are now we're doing well in the business, let's put together what I call as a recession plan or an oh crap plan or whatever plan. And the whole purpose of the plan is when we get punched in the face, because it's going to happen, we know what our execution plan is. And in that moment, when you're stuck in the emotion, we just start acting. And we go, time for the execution plan. Things went south. Here's the order. Start executing. And they have stops like round A, round B, round C. First thing, let's execute round A. Where are we in 30 days? It's time for round B or whatever it is. And that's what we try and do so that they know ahead of time this is what the action is.
Investors look at a company when they're investing, they know out of every 10 companies, 1 or 2 will do really well. Some will break even, and a lot of them will lose money. They build it into the plan, but business owners don't build this into the plan. So, and then when stuff is falling and they haven't built it into the plan, they become reactionary. And believe me, I'm not saying anything I haven't done, you know? And so when we become reactionary, we start losing perspective on objectivity. And we start making these changes that sometimes make sense or sometimes they don't.
So we're getting towards the end. Let's end on a happy note. What can we do to help them widen that gap and make more money?
Okay. Well, firstly, I think we've been talking about happy notes all the way through this because because here's the thing, business doesn't just go, most businesses I've been involved in one business that went straight up and never had, for the most part, any downswing. But again, that's less odds than finding an integrator, right? So I think we should understand that everything we're talking about, you can look through a different lens. Like a CPA will look at a P&L through a certain lens for compliance, and here's what the business is doing and this and that. We would look through a P&L through a slightly different lens. We would look at the visibility through what's the P&L telling us, not just about the health of the business, but what's the potential of the growth in the business. So we can look at what we discussed as rainy clouds and dark days. So we could look at it as, okay, what do we learn from this and what do we do going forward? So on a happier note, anyone that I have ever worked with, or anytime I have lived by the formula, money in plus money out equals something, I've always had healthier businesses and much happier clients.
I'm with you. I want to add one thing to that. We talked about the P&L, and the P&L is very important. I think the report that gets ignored and the most difficult one to understand is the balance sheet.
Yep.
Because that is where wealth is built. And a balance sheet it's a static cumulative truth. And I don't think most people realize you have to learn how to read the balance sheet and the changes between the balance sheet over periods of time. And if you're not evaluating the gap, which the balance sheet doesn't tell you the gap.
Right.
No, I've never seen a balance sheet report that said, here's the gap. They all say, here's one, here's another. You figure it the hell out. But being able to understand that, to understand the gap and the change, to know why it occurred and what you can do to make it change, that is how true wealth is built. And that's how business owners really grow their business.
If you really want to grow your business, understand everything that we can, folks, about the metrics and numbers in the business. Because what ends up happening to most business owners, and private equity companies love this, is they haven't been running the business by the numbers, putting systems and processes into the business. So you end up leaving, if you can sell your company, and majority of companies don't sell, you end up leaving millions, tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars out of your bank account. And the more you're financially, I learned this the hard way, Rocky, the more that you're financially aware of the rules, the better you will fare. I mean, I can't imagine, this is going to be sad, but I'm sure it's well over $50 million in business that we would have had that we didn't have, because early on, I was that creative driver. It was like, just sell more, sell more, sell more. It'll solve all my problems. And it did allow me to arrive at my problems in style at times, but it didn't solve all the problems. You know, you've got other problems in the business, or you've got other opportunities in the business to look at it that way. So to me, if you follow our advice, that's really the happy news, because when you follow that advice that we're laying out here, it's really hard to subjectively say, nah, that's wrong. It's very difficult. And that's where owners get in trouble. And where owners make a tremendous amount of money is on their subjective side. What they don't do is back it up with the objective side. And I'll illustrate it this way. I talked to a gentleman. I actually donated to this gentleman's company. He came to me as a client, and he had built a suit. This was about 20 years ago. He built a suit where a paraplegic could put this suit on and then stand up and walk. That's what I said. I was like, this is awesome. All right. We know there's a need in the market for people who at that time, you know, this is a wonderful thing. Couldn't sell it. Going bankrupt. Couldn't sell it. Spent all his money trying to figure that out. And I actually donated money to his company because I believed that we could keep him afloat long enough to get an investor. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. So here's the point. Just because you have a great idea doesn't mean the market's going to buy it at the time. And you must test that idea long before, in this case, this gentleman dumped in over $2 million into this stuff as his own money. And we tested that idea. By the way, I donated a few $1,000s and we tested the idea and found out it wasn't going to work. So if he had just done what we did on a few $1,000s, he would have understood that he never would have had to invest his $2 million in the 2 years of what he tried to do. So please pay attention to what we're talking about, because it's not theory, it's actually application. And money in, money out equals will never, ever steer you wrong if you live by those rules.
I concur with you. And I think what most business owners need to understand is there are things you're excellent at and there are things you are not. And for the ones that you're not, find good people and stick them in that seat and let them help you. Because
yeah,
that's what's going to drive it.
And know that you're always in control as the owner. It's like, there's a lot of times people don't. I have a good friend of mine. I won't mention his name because people will know him and he probably doesn't want this out, but he ran 6 million people through his training programs. It's a few people. Very well-known guy. And he told me a story one day that when he started the company, he was out and he was doing live events and he was pitching it and he was doing quite well for a smaller business. And he said then he wanted to grow. But what stopped him in the beginning was he felt no one could actually sell from stage better than he could. And he had to pay for the lead cost and fill the rooms, and he'd get somebody on stage and they blow it and he lose a lot of them. He said within the first month, he learned that actually people were much better on stage than he was. And he was able to scale that business up from 5 million to over $250 million by getting people in and safely testing them. Because you don't have to, like in his case, you didn't have to fill a big room with 3,000 people and find out it doesn't work. You can fill that room with 10 or 20 or 30 people and test that person and find out it does work or doesn't work, right? So there's ways of doing this safely, but that's really the key in this whole thing. Money in, money out equals.
Make that as big as possible, and life is easy, lucrative, and fun.
Yes, but you got to have systems and processes and stuff around that with implementation and accountability.
I don't disagree with you at all. And that's a lot of, I know you help with, that's a lot of what I help with. And, you know, it's a lot simpler than it sounds when you have people who know how to do it. And that's really the key.
And I think you want to go on a happy note.
Sure.
So I have had the privilege of working with very well-known, very large companies, as well as lots of small and medium-sized businesses. But I'll just name a few names. And so people will understand why I'm saying this. I told you about $1 billion company before, but I've worked with Intuit, Procter & Gamble, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, CBRE, Richard Ellis, very large real estate company. And I could go on the names. And I will tell you that even those companies get it wrong sometimes.
Sometimes. Well, they just have more cash to burn to cover their screw ups.
Yes. There was a famous one called the New Coke, right? And that's the thing, that when people are running these things and subjectively making these decisions, that's usually when they get in trouble, or they're denying it's actually going in a direction we don't want to. And those are the two things. So on a happy note, understand that if you're not a, multi-billion-dollar corporation, you don't have to go through that painful part as long as you're following the advice that Rocky and I are laying out here.
And this works at any size. It doesn't matter what your size is. It's just zeros.
It's math. It's math.
It's just
right?
math.
We both know this is math and application of the math, right? And look, math got us to the moon. People landed on the moon due to math, right? So otherwise, our astronauts would have just missed it.
If people would like to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Doug at CEO Sales Strategies, both plural.com, Doug at CEO Sales Strategies.com. If you want to know more about me, you can type in Doug C. Brown revenue growth or something like that. I will be everywhere. It's purposeful. My LinkedIn is Doug Brown 123. I have a podcast called the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. If you want to listen to that, I have some books out there. Just type me in if you want to know more about me, and I will be there. But if you want to reach out, email's the best. I will leave a phone number. Please no spam text. It is a cell phone. 832-549-4836. And that will have my voicemail on it as well. And thank you to all of you people who don't spam text me. I appreciate it. But every once in a while it happens. That's why I bring it up. And so, let me know what you're looking for. And if I can't help you or Rocky can't help you, then you will have resources who can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on again, Rocky. I'm very, very grateful.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.